I just have a little text here. So, I was a war baby, born in 45. Poetic disclosure, the label of second generation and a half, New York school poet, daughter of the Beats, with strong alliances with the investigative poetics and projective verse thrust of Charles Olson. But I'm not so secretly my own species, a hairy bag of water with a few scarves and a restless larynx, and I took a vow to poetry in 1965 at the Berkeley Poetry Conference. I grew up very near here on McDougal Street, clutching a dog tag while taking shelter under my desk at PS8 and during the air raid drills. Maybe some of you remember that, clutching your dog tags. I think it was a New York thing. I'm looking into that. And a lifelong interest with my own writing has been one of destabilizing war and patriarchy, changing the frequency, as it were, and in creating temporary autonomous zones of infrastructures for experimental and activist poetic activity. The visionary Moloch section of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, written while under the influence of peyote, was gripping in the 50s and still is. The Canaanite fire god demanded parents sacrifice their children, a propitiatory ritual of auto-da-fe. Allen was also drawing on Blake's allegorical figure Urizen with his absolutist satanic mindset. And Allen wrote, the Jehovah hyper-rationalist, judgmental lawgiver, creator of spiritual disorder and political chaos. His abstract calipers limit the infinite universe to his egoic horizon. I was drawn to the power of poetry in public space and its incantory power, struck by how Allen used mantra and other things of that sort, incantory devices as a political device. I was drawn to resistant poetics and to Shelley's view that the poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the race. Growing up in Greenwich Village, involved in interracial relationships and friendships, listening to jazz, had an early interest in Buddhism, and in expanding one's consciousness with mind-altering entheogens. I was starting to travel to more Fellaheen worlds, in Kerouac's sense of those worlds below the border, or something like that, by an early age. I traveled to Egypt in 1963, early 70s to South America and India. I felt part of Gary Snyder's rucksack revolution, and also to cultural and political activism. I was intrigued by Burroughs' methodology to the use of dream and montage and subversion of power structures. Also curious about the work of Diane de Prima, who I met in the early 60s, and Joanne Kiger. I was drawn to what I knew of the ethos of the Beat literary movement, and Allen often asked, what is it you desire? Unworldly love that has no hope of the world and cannot change the world to its delight. William Carlos Williams. Moloch, Moloch, nightmare of Moloch, Moloch the loveless, Moloch, mental Moloch, Moloch the heavy, judger of men. Moloch, whose love is endless oil and stone. Moloch, whose soul is electricity and banks. Moloch, whose poverty is the specter of genius. Moloch, whose fate is a cloud of sexless hydrogen. Moloch, whose name is the mind. I was also charmed, seduced, profoundly moved by the terrific cadence and other beauties of the poetry of Frank O'Hara, the Whitman-esque candor, deceptively insouciant elegiac power of The Day Lady Died, and so many other poems, the beautiful, organically sustained memory of my feelings. This was someone walking around in my city, noting its shimmering, luminous details, ordinary magic of an astute perception with a powerful emotional no-fuss trajectory. And I won't read from Day Lady Died, I'm sure you all know that. And then the wonderful Why I'm Not a Painter, where he said, he's talking with his artist friend, my poem is finished. I haven't mentioned Orange yet. It's 12 poems. I call it Oranges. And one day in a gallery, I see Mike's painting called Sardines. And it was specific poems in John Ashbery's The Tennis Court Oath that were particularly riveting for their erasure, montage, their juxtaposition, their complexity, their familiarity or similarity to the illogics of a dream, ellipsis, mystery. And then the book that seemed very important for a lot of us was The Tennis Court Oath. Cut up, erasure poems like America and Europe, which destabilized the first-person confessional thrust of future language poetry strategies. The pear tree, moving me, I'm around, and in my sigh, the gift of the stars, the person, horror, the morsels of this choice rebuke to me. I in the apartment, the pebble we in the bed, the roof, rain, pills found among moss from America. Then there were poems like Daffy Duck in Hollywood. I'm going to skip to some of the sort of tropes. So this friendship, camaraderie, artistic collaboration, resistance, and sometimes outright belligerence to the establishment, creating economies of gift culture and the like up against the literary mafias of New York and elsewhere, and big-time publishing. I remember this great event we had, protests at Harcourt Brace, where they brought the bomb squad. We were protesting the price of Philip Whalen's book. It was $17.50, and we had George Schneeman, our wonderful painter friend, made signs, elegant signs, $17.50 sucks, and they called the bomb squad. So some of the few of the tropes, which there are the high energy constructs, a term from Olson, and I think these, as Ron was saying, these things it's what generates the work and the writing. But emphasis on the making, the poesis, the sheer delight of it, hands-on, erasure, mathematical strategies, a la the Surrealists, the French Oulipo, thinking of some of those resonances. Amusement as an attitude, be amused, be amusing of it, a word Frank O'Hara used a good deal, and a kind of ethos, not sneering or cynical or ironical, but a healthy stance. Kenneth Koch, some of Kenneth's poems come to mind. A poem was allowed to chronicle the history of its own making. The mind of the poet could also be the subject of the poem, rather than an external theme played out with a beginning, middle, and end, and often an epiphany. As with more traditional verse, the poems might meander and shift and turn and be a kind of serendipitous adventure, rarely a straight narrative line. There's a walking around poem form, a la Apollinaire or Walt Whitman or Ron. Open form composition by field, coming out of, probably originating from Mallarmé's A Throw of the Dice, or some of that quality, parallel to indeterminacy in music and painting, which parallels the work and interests of radical Zen thinker and composer John Cage. Writing was an activity, a continuous present. In Stein's sense at times, O'Hara wrote with others around, typed as he spoke on the telephone. I remember a lot of early days in my apartment on St. Mark's Place where poet friends stayed on all night, collaborating, making little books. There'd often be 2 typewriters going. And there was a lot of small press publishing going on with the Poetry Project, where I had started working in 1966. Poetry was also seen as a collaboration with language. Language rather than logic led to certain moves. You weren't always at the controls. The language pushed on you. Free association, sound over logic, semantic plays as well. You went to language took you to strange and funny and unpredictable places, not so much concern with the final form, but an engagement with the medium of language and imagination itself, free of heavy historical reference, although I felt I really had to go in that more investigative way in these recent projects. Pseudo, mistranslation, collage, cut up, as in Berrigan's sonnets, the work of Burroughs. So the methods were similar across the different these so-called schools. And stealing lines from books, scrambling lines, deleting every second word, whiteout technique, insight into the nature of language. This idea of if the relation between word and world or between word and concept was arbitrary, one's attitude toward language changed. And then to the beats, just a few things: autobiographical hybrid prose, epistolary riff, lyric, polemic, satire, investigation, manifesto, memoir, catching natural speech rhythms, unabashed candor out of Whitman, and straightforwardness. I write this book because we're all gonna die, eulogized Kerouac. The impulse to make is gathered and discentered in magnanimous gestures through language, candid American speech rhythms, jazz, boxcar, 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 industrial, rhapsodies, skillfully cut up juxtapositions. Gregory talks of Corso, the use of mixtures containing spontaneity, bop, prosody, surreal, real images, jumps, beats, cool measures, long rapid vowels. And then Burroughs said at one point, there's no doubt that we're living freer in America as a result of the beat literary movement, which is an important part of the larger picture of political change in the world during the past 40 years, when a 4-letter word couldn't appear on the printed page and minority rights were ridiculous. That's a little taste. Thank you.